All right, so weekly power rankings, a different kind of power rankings, week 4 here. If you have not watched one of these, I'm not going to explain how I came up with this all every single week, but I will say just make sure you watch like the week 1 power rankings show. You'll understand where this is coming from a lot better. This is not my opinion on these teams, and this is not a predicting thing at all. This is simply just saying, due to how well you have played so far in certain categories, what does that typically mean for you going forward? Basically, the way to view it is instead of saying this is a prediction of how good these teams will be week 17, it's if these teams continue to play the way they've played for the first 4 weeks, this is how many wins they'll probably end up with. Finally, I'm using Pro Football Focus's grades. I am not using my own grades. So if you're wondering, how come you have this team there instead of that team there? It's not me. So again, if you're going to write in the comments, how could you have this team ahead of that team? You're kind of missing the point. It's more so just using the algorithm to seeing where these teams are currently at, given what we've seen from them so far. It's just sort of a fun exercise. I've been enjoying doing it. It seems like some people really enjoy it as well, which is fun to see. And let's get into the power rankings. All right, so number 1, yes, you're reading that correctly. How about your Los Angeles Chargers, who knocked off the team that was number 1 last week, the Las Vegas Raiders? So crazy stuff there. A big chunk of this has been their quarterback playing like an elite level quarterback through 4 weeks. That's obviously a big part of it. The receiving core, though, has been a surprise for me. It's played significantly better than I thought. Not significantly better, but basically the Chargers, I had them as a tier 3 unit kind of across the board this year, and they've had just a few spots where they've improved on that, where they've been at least tier 2 or tier 1. Receiving core is tier 2. Offensive line, tier 2. Quarterback, tier 1. So those few things has really kind of made the difference. Also, tier 1 pass rush, that's also, you get that tier 1 pass rush, that is valuable. So good for them. Can they keep it up? I don't know, but they're kind of a testament to, hey, if you don't really have any real weaknesses, you're going to be a pretty good football team. And I also wonder if their run defense is low simply due to scheme as opposed to being due to, their actual talent. I wonder how much that factors in. Number 2, Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, you're reading that right. Cincinnati Bengals, number 2, another surprise. Big chunk of that is their running game has been very good. The 2.5 wins you get with your running game being elite, that's going to cause a couple teams to jump up. Even if you don't have them there, this is still an 11-win football team. I've had my complaints about Zach Taylor, but hey, the team itself is doing very good. Elite receiving unit currently at tier 1 with a tier 2 quarterback. That stuff, you're racking up a lot of wins right there. Number 3, the Arizona Cardinals. Again, Kyler playing like a tier 1 quarterback, offensive line blocking very well, receiving unit being tier 1. Not getting much points in the run game or run defense, but their coverage unit has been, according to Pro Football Focus, elite so far, and their pass rush has been elite so far. So they're kind of a team where, while they do have a couple of flaws, it doesn't really matter because what they do well, they do so well that it's really okay. Like, it's fine if you don't run the ball to perfection, and that's just strictly talking the running backs, not the run blocking, which has been much better. Even if you don't do that kind of stuff, it's okay because, again, you got Kyler Murray and you got a great receiving core and great coverage unit, shockingly. So good stuff all around for the Cardinals. Number 4, the Dallas Cowboys. So again, these are 4 teams that I personally did not have in the playoffs, although I did have a couple close. So the fact that they're number 1 through 4 is certainly surprising to me, at least. So good for them. You have Dak Prescott, who's only getting credit for being a tier 3 quarterback right now. I suspect that will go up as we get a bigger sample size to at least tier 2, which is where I had him preseason. The receiving core being tier 1, you have a tier 1 running back unit, so that's a big chunk right there. That's going to get you a lot, especially with the tier 1 O-line and really good coverage. So that's where you're at here. Number 5, the Cleveland Browns, who, Mayfield didn't have his best day. Tier 3 quarterback, that feels right. That's where I had him preseason. I think the biggest area I could see improvement here for Cleveland, I guess 2 areas. The receiving unit being just, this is just tier 3. I think that could improve as we see them get more playing time, see Odell out there more. Also, the running back room, I could see that should be tier 1. I'm surprised it dropped to tier 2. I suspect that will jump back up. And with their coverage and their pass rush being as good as it is, I predicted them to win the Super Bowl preseason. I stand by that, quite frankly. I've liked what I've seen, even if there's been a little bit of early season clunkiness. That's okay, because the next team on our list, we saw them do that last year, right? Tampa Bay. Tom Brady's still tier 1. Receiving unit been tier 3, so that's kind of a shocker, right? You on paper, it feels like the best receiving unit in football, so we expect that to go up. Offensive line playing well, that makes sense. And then defense, their coverage unit seems weirdly high. I'm surprised they're getting a 2.27 coverage unit grade right here because, a lot of it's been injuries, but it's had real struggles. I wonder how much of that was just, getting to play Matt Ryan, who at one point couldn't stop throwing the ball directly to Tampa Bay corners. But as a whole, I think that they'll probably improve off this projected 11.71 wins so far. Number 7, the Rams, who I believe this is the lowest the Rams have been this season. They took a hit after that game against the Cardinals, specifically offensively. Stafford's only getting credit for being a tier 2 quarterback right here. You have the O-line still tier 1, but the receiving core tier 3. So little issues right there. Defense still very good and probably will improve a little bit. So I think this team is probably better than 11.34 wins so far. And we actually have them as a tie, so I shouldn't have had them at 7 and 8. They should be tied at 7. The Raiders just one spot below, or I guess technically tied. Same quarterback rating of the tier 2. They don't have any points for their offensive line. Only team on this chart with something that's a 0 in one of the first 3 categories, either quarterback, offensive line, or receiving. But their coverage still being tier 1, their pass rush still being tier 1. You get over 4 wins right there, and then with Derek Carr and the receiving unit being good, they can overcome a bad offensive line, and they've still had some value with their running games, so that's where they're at. All right, next panel, here we go. Denver, they dropped a bit. They were a consistent top 5 team, but after that game where they kind of had to play a real contender, I don't want to say they got exposed or anything, but they didn't look as good. Their coverage was tier 1. It's dropped to tier 2, which I think is fair given what we've seen. Run defense still very good, and the receiving unit still very good. Quarterback dropped again. It started up the season tier 1, went to tier 2, now at tier 3. Big chunk of that is their starter just not being in there. That's going to cause it to drop. But they're still looking good, right? And the question is, how much of this is just because of the easy schedule from the first 3 weeks, and how much, or is it just that, one bad game negates it too much? This is kind of the issue of small sample sizes, even 4 weeks in, where we are kind of getting to know these teams a little bit better. Number 10, the Baltimore Ravens. So just below the Broncos, who they just beat. Again, this list does not factor that kind of stuff in whatsoever. Ravens, Lamar is looking very good, and Pro Football Focus, their grading system typically doesn't do Lamar a lot of favors. Well, so far, tier 2, I'd have him 1 tier higher, but that's just me. Offensive line's blocking way better after that rough first week. Wonder how much of that was just, good Raiders defense that we didn't expect to be that good. Receiving core is looking good, and that's the biggest surprise. If you're a Ravens fan, you're saying, thank God we finally have a receiving core. It's looked really good. Defense maybe lacks some to be desired, but I actually think this could be a pretty fair rating. The Ravens are good. Are they complete enough to make a deep run? That I don't know, but I think they're at least going to contend for a playoff spot. Number 11, this could be a surprise to some people. Quarterback is tier 4, so they're the highest tier 4 quarterback. In fact, out of the quarterbacks who are not tier 1, 2, or 3, the next highest on this list, you're going to have to get the number 22. So big jump here. Why does the formula have them so good? Well, a big part of that is the 2.5 wins you get with the running back, Alvin Kamara. He just means a ton to this team. Receiving core is actually graded well at Pro Football Focus, which is kind of a surprise to me, but that's another aspect. So if you disagree, well, then you probably think the Saints are lower. They don't get a ton of points with their defense so far. Their defense did get lit up by Daniel Jones, so that's going to hurt it. But again, 4 games, small sample size. You can agree or disagree with any of that kind of stuff. Number 12, the Titans, who, hey, tier 1 quarterback Ryan Tannehill. I suspect that will go down to tier 2, where he's kind of been since he's been a Titan. Obviously, the 2.5 wins for the running back is very deserved. Same thing with Kamara. That kind of blends together. O-line's been fine. Receiving core hasn't, but a big chunk of that was like they had no receivers last week. People are kind of making a bigger deal out of that Jets game, I think, than they should, because like you have no receivers. Yeah, you're going to look worse. I think that it's not really a huge issue. And their defense has actually been like not completely atrocious. It hasn't been great, but it's been okay. So, you're getting over 2 wins with your defense, which is 2 more than you had last year. Like, you can live with that. Seattle actually getting some points all the way across the board here. So the biggest 2 chunks they get is quarterback and receiving. This is kind of what we expected from them. That is the way this team is built. So there you go. Number 14. So if you think about it, top 14 teams make the playoffs in the NFL. So this would be the cutoff. You do have Kansas City, who's had a rough first 4 weeks. I was even thinking about, are the Kansas City Chiefs a playoff team? Or excuse me, are they 0-4 without Tyreek Hill? They might be 0-4 without Tyreek Hill. Part of that is Mahomes hasn't played as well as we've seen him play in the past, but I thought he had a good week against the Eagles, and obviously, hey, you have Tyreek Hill, so there you go. Offense looking good, and I suspect they'll get a couple more wins once Mahomes starts playing like we've seen Mahomes play in the past, which we all expect him to do. The defense, not great. Not great at all. Only 0.82 wins for the entire defense, which is why this is lower and why the Chiefs might be a lot more vulnerable than we expected going into this season. We thought they'd at least have some talent on defense. So far, not much. And then number 15, the team that the Chiefs just beat, the Philadelphia Eagles. They have tier 3 quarterback, tier 1 offensive line. There you go. That's kind of a surprise. And tier 2 receiving. So this was a team that last year they had the worst receiving unit in football. Devontae Smith has completely changed that entire receiving core and entire offense, quite frankly. So that's very nice to see. Again, defense looked very good the first couple weeks, has definitely fallen off since then. Part of that might just be playing Dallas and Kansas City, but still, that's where they are. And another tie that I did not put a tie on the thing. I got to be better at that, I suppose. The Green Bay Packers are right here. They also tier 3 quarterback play, but a huge chunk of that was just, that week 1 is just, it's going to hurt Rodgers and going to take him a while to overcome that, I think, because O-line's been good, actually dropped off a little bit. It was really good the past few weeks, but still tier 3, and I think it's probably better than that. Receiving unit is, I think, probably, maybe it's not better than that. I don't know. But Devontae Adams just does so much for that team. He makes it better. So that's kind of why I feel like it's better. And you're getting points everywhere, right? You're getting points in the run defense, in coverage, and in pass rush. So all of that stuff factors in. All right, next panel. Number 17, the New York Giants, who this algorithm kept having the Giants as pretty high. And I'm kind of just like confused a while. Like, why do they like the Giants so much? Well, then the Giants went out and beat the Saints. So, like, maybe the Giants are better than we realize. I don't know. Potentially, because, it has Daniel Jones as a tier 1 quarterback, which is not true. He is not a tier 1 quarterback. Although he is playing better and is not a tier 5 or even 4 quarterback like we thought he would be heading into this season. At least I did. Not a ton else across the board. So you get rid of like a couple wins there. And they're down to a 6.5 win team. So they're not spectacular, but they are better. They're not garbage either. Number 18, Carolina Panthers took a huge hit, losing to the Cowboys. Cowboys can do that to teams. Coverage went from tier 1 to tier 2. Run defense and pass rush, I believe, both dropped. Darnold was at a tier 2 quarterback, drops to a tier 1, a tier 3, which I think is fair. That's kind of how I felt about Darnold this entire season, is tier 3. Solid. You'll take a tier 3, but he's not a star. He kind of just runs the offense, which, hey, there's a lot of value in that. 2 wins, in fact, in that, or 1.99. Receiving core dropped off a little bit as well. I could see that jumping back up. But this is kind of where I see the Panthers at. Maybe a little bit better, but as a fringe playoff team, perhaps. Minnesota's another team that dropped off. They have no wins in the offensive line or in the running back game, but part of that is, no Dalvin Cook for an aspect of this season. That's going to hurt things. And Kirk Cousins went from tier 1 quarterback to tier 2, so you lose some wins there. Defense has actually done decent. It's had its bad moments, but it's improved in some areas. I thought they had a good week against Cleveland, although part of that was Baker Mayfield missing every throw, basically. But still, this is the worst the Vikings have looked in the ratings so far. Number 20, the New England Patriots right here. Tier 3 quarterback, that's nice to see, right? For a rookie quarterback, that's pretty good. But then again, across the board, it's not a lot of bad. It's just a lot of not spectacular, basically. You do have a solid coverage unit. I think that, again, not having Gilmore, that makes it look worse. The rest of, the front seven, not spectacular, I would say. And you also have, offensive line, which has been a disappointment, as that's typically an area of strength for New England for, years and years. 21, the Buffalo Bills. Now, their coverage unit has been insane, and that's tier 1 here, and I think anyone watching can agree with that. So that defense has looked really good, especially with that tier 1 run defense on top of it. Pro Football Focus hates the Bills' offense, so that's just an aspect. I don't get why they're tier 5 offensive line. I don't get why Josh Allen is just tier 3. Maybe that's just factoring over from his 2 not great first performances, but we expect that to be better. The receiving core does not have a great Pro Football Focus grade. It's kind of mediocre, but the Bills are much better than a 6.5 win team. We can all agree with that. Their quarterback is, you're going to get 2 wins there, right? And then for offensive line, at least throw on another win there, I would say. And then for receiving core, I think throw on another win. So you're talking at least 4 extra wins. That's a 10.5 win team. That feels far more right to me. But again, part of that is just the small sample size of it all. 22, the San Francisco 49ers here. This is a very surprising low score for them. I think out of all the teams that are low, this is, to me, easily the most surprising. So let's talk about why are they so low. One, the quarterback being tier 5. So that's an aspect. And you could argue, hey, Kyle Shanahan makes a tier 5 quarterback look like a tier 3 quarterback. So even if this is the situation, they're probably getting more value than actually the talent is giving them. I think that's probably fair. I also think the receiving core has been better than tier 3, so I'd factor that in. Again, this only accounts for talent, not for coaching. So that's another aspect. But, talent, I think it's probably fair to say, is probably about a 6.5 win team, maybe a little bit higher. I think their defense should be getting a little bit more points. So maybe like a 7.5, 8 win team in terms of talent. But the other aspect is, Kyle Shanahan is a good football coach, and he's going to raise that and get you more wins than your talent should give you, so that's what can put you into the playoffs. Number 23, the Atlanta Falcons here. So Atlanta Falcons at 6.27 wins, maybe a little bit higher than most teams would have them. Hey, give Matt Ryan some credit. He's been playing better these past few weeks. Still not a great team, but you got points in almost every category other than pass rush. So at least you got that going for you. You're not abysmal anywhere, just not really great anywhere either. Number 24, the Miami Dolphins, who I sat here and said that I didn't think this team would make the playoffs, and I'm taking a victory lap because of really just how much people criticized that take I had. And, well, now it's looking pretty good. Coverage is still awesome, and coverage is still going to win you some games. I mean, you're going to get turnovers that way. Like, having an elite coverage unit, you're going to win some football games. Their offense has just been a complete mess, and I actually think you could argue PFF as being a bit generous, giving the Dolphins a tier 4 grade here. I think they're probably tier 5 from what we've seen, but, I think Tua getting back could help them. How much, though? Not enough to make the playoffs. I just don't see that unless he comes in and starts playing just completely out of his mind, which we haven't seen him do yet. Final panel, number 25, we have the Chicago Bears right here. So, again, tier 4 quarterback. Some people might say, hey, Justin Fields getting them up to tier 4. They were actually tier 4 last week. Andy Dalton was kind of, Andy Dalton's a pretty typical, clear-cut tier 4 quarterback, I think. The Bears are also the worst team to have points in every single category. A lot of tier 4s here. Offensive line's actually been decent. People complain about the O-line, but it really only had that one bad week, and, I think it was more the receiving core and the quarterback and the play calling than the offensive line, although the offensive line also not great against Cleveland. Washington here, again, every week I talk about it. Biggest disappointment has been the Washington Balls coverage unit. Yes, Washington Balls. That's a podcast reference in case anyone's confused. But basically, yeah, the coverage unit being 0 when I had it as 3 preseason has been tough. Not getting any wins from your quarterback position is always going to have you down here. In fact, you look at all the zeros. I mean, all 5 of the tier 5 quarterback rooms are in bottom 11 on this grading system. It's tough. That's a lot of wins that you're leaving on the board there, not having a great quarterback. I think Fitzpatrick could at least get them, to tier 4. I would probably put the receiving core higher than they have them, but as a whole, it's just been a disappointing year for Washington. Number 27, the Jaguars. A big reason why they're this high is the 2.5 wins you get from the running back room. Although I do have to say, the quarterback being tier 5 is fair for the way the 4 weeks have gone, but definitely Trevor Lawrence did not play like a tier 5 quarterback in week 4, so this is kind of where the algorithm can be not really an issue, but you just have to take it, understand what you're looking at, where it's not predicting anything. It's simply just talking about what's happened so far. Number 28 here, the Detroit Lions. Hey, Jared Goff giving you a tier 4 quarterback. That's good. Offensive line's been good. Receiving core is surprisingly good. Defense is horrible. I mean, you get a little bit for pass rush. That's it. Defense has been a mess. So that's why they're not a good football team. But at least there's some talent on the offensive side of the ball. So that's nice to see. But yeah, probably the worst defense in football. It's just bad. Number 29, maybe the disappointment of the year, at least up there, is the Indianapolis Colts. Carson Wentz being tier 4, I think that's fine. Offensive line being tier 5, again, I kind of get it, but man, that's brutal. Also, coverage unit being tier 5, like that's just not what we expected coming in. Receiving core being tier 4 is probably like a pleasant surprise for them, but as a whole, you just, you can't get a lot going when you don't have too many positions of greatness in areas that you would need to be great in to win in the NFL in 2021. Number 30, the Houston Texans. Oh man, it was fun those first couple weeks when we thought the Texans might be good. No, they do stink, but hey, there's still some value here. Offensive line's not horrible. Receiving core isn't horrible. Coverage unit isn't horrible. But the team as a whole is horrible when, the best thing going for you is you have, one tier 3 and a few tier 4s. Number 31, the New York Jets, hey, they won a game against the Titans, who are definitely a better team than them, even when they don't have a good receiving core. But I still don't think this is a great football team by any means. I think that Zach Wilson did kind of bail them out with some incredible plays that are going to, he had probably 4 or 5 plays that are like a 5-point swings in terms of points expected adding. So that's like a 20-point difference in the game. Like, yeah, okay, you're probably going to win that game then. And receiving core made some plays as well there, so it's not just him. But that's basically how they won that game. Again, you got to take Zach Wilson's entire 4-week stretch into account. Obviously, I think tier 4 quarterback, that feels, you might argue it feels a little generous. I think it feels fine, but it's not great just because you have to factor those first 3 weeks in, specifically weeks 2 and 3. O-line's been fine. Receiving core has not, but it showed some improvements finally in week 4, so that's nice to see. And the defense, probably a bit overrated, although I don't think it's as overrated as PFF thinks it is. PFF, not a fan, but, that's just how they view it. I'm not going to agree with everything someone says. And finally, 32, the team that already has a win, but they're horrible. They're just an awful football team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. In fact, I just looked it up. I didn't realize there's only 2 0-4 teams. Feels like there's usually more 0-4 teams and more 4-0 teams. Only 3 teams with a 0 in their schedule. That's besides the point. Pittsburgh Steelers, not great. Big Ben falling off a cliff. That hurts. There's probably a couple wins you lose there. But it's not just that. Receiving core has played horrible. Is it just the quarterback? Maybe. I don't know. But, those 2 things do work together. And so we expected there to probably be around 4 wins in those 2 categories that are just gone. O-line's actually not been the issue. Defense has been awful as well. Coverage, I think we thought could be a weakness. It's been a massive one. And again, part of this is defensive injuries. Hey, their run defense is still good, but as a whole, what a mess. Pittsburgh Steelers, not a good football team through 4 weeks. Maybe they can turn it around. We'll see. So yeah, that's what this algorithm tells us. What did you guys think of these power rankings? Always love hearing from you. Again, it's just a fun way to do this stuff. I enjoy making these, so hope you guys enjoyed watching it or listening to it, I guess, because it's, half of it is kind of audio. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed it. And of course, as always, Thanks for watching.